part 2 to be continued. All right. So now for something completely different. As they say in Monty Python. The wisdom of birth was the last conversation we had.
Yes.
Which was a really incredible conversation on your podcast, OG Rose.
Yeah.
And we explored the parallels between the experience of birth, pregnancy, giving birth, and midwifery with transformation and becoming as a person.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's quite a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But in the course of the time since then, that's continued to be a very alive metaphor for me, because it feels like emotional realization has a birth-like quality to it. And I remember sending you that message or voice message where I was like, man, I feel like I'm having birth contractions.
Yeah.
And they're coming closer together, which is the quality of birth contractions. As they start out like less and less, and then as they come closer together and closer together, you're getting closer to the actual birth.
Yes.
And I imagine this may also be interesting to explore at like a big picture level. Like civilizationally, things do seem to be getting more intense and closer together. Like the crazy things are coming closer together. So we're moving from that position of having reached the limits of something, as you know, Ebert is talking about limits, into the place where we're having to give over to something else is coming. And that is happening collectively, but I think insofar as we are tuned in to ourselves, we're also actually synced up with that, because we're not separate from the earth. We're not separate from the biosphere, the noosphere, what's going on collectively. And so it's no coincidence that a lot of things were brought to the surface during COVID years, for example, because the collective state of uncertainty and anxiety and abnormalcy, all of that kind of stirred up, like, okay, what's under the surface that wants to be known? And so, yeah, I find that to be very beautiful. And
that's all really great. I love that conversation we had. That was wonderful. And I think about the word that comes to mind when I think about birth, or a word that comes to mind is like the inevitability. Like something that I would always feel where I was like, oh my, like, okay, this is happening, like this. There's this kind of inevitability that it's so it's unavoidable, and there's kind of no way to get around it. I think I did mention this in the podcast, where there's like this, that there's an intensity of that, where there's really no one else who can do it, who can get through that, but you. But then there's also the element of, like, for me, something to keep in my mind when going through the birthing process is just how many, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of other women have done this too. It's a very natural thing, and that's what's so strange about it. It's like it's very natural to feel those contractions. It's very good, even though it's very difficult. It is bringing about the birth, and I think it's interesting too when paying attention to contractions. Like I would always kind of hope, like, okay, I hope that my contraction level is at this, and I've already dilated to a certain amount. 10 would be where you're about to push the baby, and about to push the baby out. But sometime I remember with Reed, when we were giving birth to our third child, I was
3 children, folks. You wouldn't believe it. There you go.
Thank you for your kind words, Jacob. It's amazing to me because I remember with having our third child that it was like I was having contractions and I was like, okay, this I can do this is bearable, but I was only at like a 3 or something like this. There's still a long way to go till 10, and I think there's something about like the sort of the realization that this is going to get like a lot harder, and just being able to like give yourself over to that. It's kind of terrifying, but it's also like you just have to completely give yourself over to that. Like it is going to get a lot harder. And yet that's like, you're in for that. You're in for it. That's what you're in for. And like you're going to have to kind of sustain yourself through that and push yourself through that. And then when you do, like there's a sweetness to that sorrow, like the sorrow that your body kind of feels. It's like this strange thing because it's sorrowful in the sense that there's a lot of aching and like the moaning and the crying, but there's a sweetness in that. And like the birth is such a moment of like, it is finished. You know, it is finished. Like that is all of the travail is sort of done. And then you have the new life, and and then the new life cries, and then it begins to, I mean, only moments later, like the baby is already nursing. And so it's an incredibly like, I mean, it's hard to put it into language, but it's a wild experience. I mean, I'm very blessed that I was able to have natural birth because I just wanted to feel it. Like I wanted to feel all of it, because if that's how we get here, then it's worth it to me to feel it, you know. And maybe the word sorrow seems like out of place, but there is something of a mourning there. But that also is because of the fact that it can hurt a lot, or there's also the mourning of like releasing the child. Because I remember feeling the sense of like, oh my word, I have to, like the baby goes from here to like into the world, and I don't have the security of knowing they're like inside of me anymore. Like they're just out in the world, and dear God, like help me. Like there's such a vulnerability you feel in the fact that they're like no longer just carried with you all the time. They're out here, and so there's a kind of you're kind of mourning that season, and but yet celebrating the season of actually meeting the child. Like you're actually going to, like for me it was just, I mean, seeing their faces, I'll never forget those moments. I'll never ever forget seeing each of my children for the first time, like their faces. There's just something that it makes this moment where you just are overcome with a type of love that's just so otherworldly. And I think there's something about this seeing of the new life, seeing their faces, seeing their little motions and their movement, and it's just like, this is a real living being. This is a real living being that was inside of me. It's a real living person. It's wild. It's so wild. And you know, it's interesting now. I'm really happy we're like talking about this again, because recently I've been wrestling a bit with like just writing my own, like I like to write poems here and there. I don't know why, I just do. But I've been struggling to feel justified in doing it. Like I'll go to do it and I'll almost just break down being like, why does it matter? Like who cares? You know, it's like but then I think to myself, like, there's a reason why I feel compelled to do this right now. There's a reason why. And maybe there's no reason, and that's the reason. Like, maybe it doesn't matter. That's why it matters so much. And, like, with children, it's like, you don't have to necessarily bring human beings into the world, but yet, like, it matters. And it's so important because that child matters. You know, each human being matters profoundly. I guess I'm just trying to remind myself that like the things we do when we create, or as artists or poets or writers or songwriters, like those things, yes, they're not like, obviously they're not exactly the same in their nature as a human living child or living being, but they are creations that, you know, almost are wanting to be in the world, right? Like they're pushing out to be out in the world. Let them come out, you know? Let yourself birth it out. And so it's just a reminder to myself, I think. Thanks for letting me share all of that.
Wow, I've never conceived of childbirth in that way, of like the potential of the child wants to be realized through you, rather than it's just like, often we're thinking of it as just like, it's very much from the perspective of the parents, like we're choosing to have a child because of how it's going to kind of be a part of our thing.
Right. That's or it, make us a parent, or
it's become parents to have that experience, but not like in this way of like, as so apparent with a lot of artists, is like, it just comes through. You don't really, sometimes you create something that's just amazing and you're like, how the F did I do that? And I have a number of little musical projects over the years where I'm just like, I don't know how I did that. This is way beyond my capacity, but it came out and it's there, and so that's kind of mystifying. And the birth of the child sounds to me like a really profound, beautiful, and mysterious experience of the same. I was really interested when you said otherworldly love.
Yeah.
Because that's like when we are most in contact with the mystery of life, and that's often a love-saturated experience. It has that alien quality, I think. Like the like getting out of like, we settle into our humanity in a way that normalizes everything and reduces the strangeness of everything. And then life is punctuated by these experiences in which you really see things as they are, and as they are is profoundly strange. Like you look at obviously this is significantly enhanced by psychedelic journeying, and that's where it occurred for me, but just like recognizing my own body, my own hands, like, and just getting beyond hand and into like, this is like super complex, like mammalian evolutionary thing that looks like a branching of a tree, but like, where did it come from? And if you really just attend to yourself closely enough, or another, it's possibly even easier in the other, you can get to that loving strangeness.
Yes. Loving strangeness, I love that.
And what could be more strange than the process of pregnancy and birth? Like, what? This is how it happens? Yeah.
Oh, it's wild. It is so strange. And it's hard to even, I guess you just let it happen through you, because it is so surreal, and that's why it's very hard to articulate. But I remember with our first child, when they handed him to me, and I saw his face, I felt his body, and it was like, oh my goodness, there's like, it just became this like reality of, I had a human being inside of me, growing and like developing. There's something that is so surreal about it, and yet it happens. It is reality, right? It is the reality of our procreation as a species. It's so incredibly fascinating.
Has it like transformed the way you see human beings, like, not just your own children, but people? Because you're so deeply aware of like, this is where everybody came from.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always had a connection with children since before I was a mother. I nannied and babysat a lot. I've always loved children. I just naturally had a kind of connection and enjoyment with playing with kids, talking with them, listening to them. I love imagination. I love like just being silly and playing and whatnot. And I loved being able to help mothers. It was nice to be able to know I could help mom out, give her a break. She could go to the store, or she could do whatever she needed to do. And so it was a really lovely, like, mutually beneficial thing. But kids, to me, are wonders, absolute wonders. Like, they're they're wonderful, and they are wonders. They are just full of all of the expressions, you know, and all of the questions. But I think that having the physical experience of having children really kind of brought back the sense of miracle, like the miracle that is every human being. So for me, like, I think I had a sense of that also from the concept that, you know, every person is a child of God. That's sort of how I was raised to thinking about it that way. But honestly, it was a very helpful framework because it made me realize that everybody is precious. You know, everybody is made in the image of the divine. So that's something that I always like really. It's funny, I even get these senses sometimes, like especially if I'm in crowded places, or if I'm just kind of walking past more people than I usually do. I'm kind of a hobbit now, so I don't do that as much. But I get this real deep sense that, like, I really hope each person knows how loved they are. Like, just how loved and how valued and how perfectly made, you know, how they are here for a reason. Like, there's just, I can't describe it, but it's just this real sense of, like, you are somebody's child. And the love that is felt for that child that you feel as a mother is indescribable. It's uncontainable. And I there's this sort of deep desire that every human being on earth know that they are loved like that. Even if for some reason, by some tragic experience, they couldn't feel that from their mother or their own parents or something like that, that they would know that they are loved like that. You know? It's like a deep desire in my heart for people to know that. And I do think that it comes from, like, it is absolutely deepened and enhanced from being a mother myself and actually having my own children.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, hey, like, I just sometimes feel this sense of, like, hey, you're special. Like, I know it seems so, maybe it sounds cheesy.
Yeah.
I don't mean it that way, though. It's like, it's a genuine feeling of, like, that there's something so incredibly amazing about being a human being in this earth, and you are here. And so it's yeah.
It strikes me as like the voice of the Divine Mother when you speak it. Because there is this like holy motherhood. I know Mother Teresa's pretty contentious these days, but like this notion of like a mother, there's like a motherhood figure whose embrace stretches around like the whole earth. I remember there was I picked up a book. One of my exes had been to see this Indian holy woman whose name was like Ima, or Amma basically was her name, was like mother. And she would just hug people and bless them. And she was like a saint basically, and people like in their millions would flock to come and line up and just receive this hug from this woman. And it's like that kind of is a kind of divine energy. It's the Divine Mother love that's available, you know, for all of humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very moving to hear.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, Jacob, and I'm happy to share on it. And yeah, I'm thankful, like, I have a very loving mother, and I've also known mother figures who are very loving, and there's something about that mother love that is a gift to receive. And if in any way, like, one can participate in sharing it, it's so humbling, you know? It's so humbling.
Yeah.
And, like, I think about it with my kids, how, you know, like, they're the day in and day out, where I know my own errors. Like, I feel my own impatience sometimes, as anyone does as a human, I suppose. Like, I can sometimes, like, I just hope to God that they know, like, that I love them. And I make sure to articulate that and everything like that. But it's just, you know, sometimes in families, like, you'll often see the best and the worst about each other because, you know, you're with each other, brushing up shoulders all the time. And I don't know, there's a hope that, like, I guess what I want to say, let me say it this way. The children teach me about grace like about mercy, like in a profound way, because sometimes I'm not my best, or I try not to, but you know, we're all human, so there are times when maybe you grow impatient, or you sort of snap, and then I think at least my approach, and obviously people would disagree maybe, but I like to be clear that, hey, I'm sorry that I did that, you know, that wasn't right, and apologize, so they can learn how to do that themselves one day, like, and you know, because I think there's something healing about saying, hey, I'm sorry I snapped at you, that wasn't very nice. I shouldn't have done that. I was feeling frustrated for this reason, but you know, it's not okay that I did that. I love you. Those things are like really restorative and healing, you know, in the daily experiences. And what I see from my children is an insane amount of grace and mercy. Like, they'll just tell me, like, of course it's okay, mommy, you know, or like, I love you, or you're you know, like, you're the best mommy in the world. Like, they'll say these things that just, you know, melt my heart, and they show a type of grace that to me is so pure and so precious. And I just think to them, like, they often will say things that to me, I don't know, it's so interesting, because they'll say things that just speak to the grace of God, really. Because like one day I was like crying in the car, feeling like a crappy person or something, and my kids were there with me. Then we were with each other almost all the time. And I remember Haven saying something like, you know, if you feel like a bad person, that's okay, because God still loves you. He's like, would he love you if you blew up half the world? And I was like, I'm not sure. He's like, he would still love you. And it was just this like beautiful, tender moment of this demonstration of like the grace that just it just cuts to the heart, and like it just melts so much of, like, I don't know, the things we can get caught up with worrying about or being like down on ourselves about. Like, that grace melts all of that. So that was a lot, Jacob, but thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really appreciating the reciprocity of it. Which is another thing you can't really get a grasp on until you're in it. That it is not entirely a one-way relationship. Of you giving and you caring. Okay. So I'm interested also. I actually have a very practical question.
Yeah, sure.
Having witnessed your children and my sister's children, and certainly like grown in my love for children in recent years, to the point where I can like really, like, I think I said to you before, I wrote it down somewhere, like sometimes I really feel like I'm experiencing the kingdom of heaven when I see kids, like, honestly going through like the darkest period of my life last year. Like, I would regularly just be at the park or something, and I would see like a little toddler doing something, and it would just like cut straight through my heart to something very pure and golden and wonderful. And so obviously that's made me more open to the possibility of having children, birthing children. And yet I'm still thinking to myself, like, I don't know that I could do what you do.
Like,
I don't know that I can.
All the time?
Yes, I don't know that I could be a mother. And we're in an age of like equalization. So I'm interested what your sense is of like you've articulated the profound love that's born out of birthing your own children and feeding your own children and raising your children and being in relationship with your children. And I think that probably goes a long way, and there's like there's a lot of that I cannot ever perceive and know without being in it, that is affording of the care and sacrifice. And yet there's still part of me that wonders, like, is there some aspect of female nature that is somehow slightly better capable of bearing that constancy of the presence of children. But I don't know. But historically, of course, it has been the case.
Yeah.
That women have borne that majority of the time, and men have borne that kind of intermittently, and that, you know, played different roles.
Yeah, no, it's thank you for that, Jacob. And it's difficult to, you know, to speak for like other people or other women or the difference between men and women, because obviously that can vary person to person. I would say though that I think the nature of the mother to nurture, literally like with breastfeeding and with taking care of the children's needs in that way, of the holding and the all of those things. I mean, the feeding is a big one, right? They need to be near the mother for that. And to me, that's a kind of biological indicator of something that we should not overlook. Like there's something important about that shows maybe a greater need for the presence of the mother. Now, I think the presence of the father is very important in terms of providing support and to step in and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I probably, like, even though I mentioned my impatience, on the whole, and I probably received this from my mother and the gift that she is in my life, but she's incredibly patient. My mom is incredibly patient, and I think I hope that I can be as, like, for me, if I could be as patient as my mom or close to it, like that I'm thankful for that, because she has shown such great patience with me and my siblings, and, you know, just situations in her life. She's been very, very patient, and she is just patient, just in the very daily things. Like, she's a patient person, and she's long-suffering, you know. And so...
What do you mean long-suffering?
Long-suffering, it's basically just an old English word for, like, patience. Basically, she can go long, like, basically she can suffer something, not suffer like in a necessarily arduous way, but like she can take it for a long time, you know, like, and she'll be able to keep showing that sort of engagement and without like just suddenly being like, you know, getting impatient or just being like, never mind, I'm not even doing this, and walking away. Like, she'll continue to give her presence, even if it's hard on her, like she'll be there. Which you have to be aware of that, because there can be risks to that, of completely like not taking care of your own needs. Like, that can be a risk to that. But the strength of that is you have an incredible amount of patience, especially with children, because children are in a completely different way of thinking about the world. You know, they don't think in terms of like, they're not necessarily gonna, at the younger ages, help facilitate the rhythm that you need to do to keep for the home. Like, you're the one still doing the meal, getting everybody to kind of gather to eat the meal, cleaning after the meal, and like they have their chores and their tasks with that, but there's a lot that's just going to be on the mother, basically. And we do live in like more of an atomized culture where there's less mothering of the mother, you know. Now, I am fortunate to have my mother be able to be, you know, emotionally close, but also relatively close, not like just down the road, but we support each, like, she's definitely helpful and very supportive of for me, and, you know, just come over to her home to to just have her presence with me and the kids too, and my dad, who's also very involved, like, in loving, and the kids like love my parents, and so it's nice because when I'm there, it's like like there's just a couple of extra loving hands and eyes and people you trust to be able to help with the constant stuff, because it is constant, you know, 24/7, every single day of the week. There's no break. Yeah, there is no break.
Very important.
And like the fact that there's no break, like in the sense of like you don't get like clock out, clock in.
There's slightly something terrifying about that to me. That's the thing. It's like, I love kids. I'm down to have kids. I'm down to have them for a really long time. But then there's something about that. There's no break. There's no exit. Yeah. There's no like.
Right, but there's.
But there are breaks because you have people hopefully supporting you.
Yes, you have breaks in the sense that you have to find a way to make breaks. Like, you have to find a way to shoulder that with another person, with your partner, your husband, your wife, your the grandparents. Like, there is aunts and uncles, and also just being able to like be strategic with like, okay, this is a safe area, so I feel comfortable with them playing, where I don't have to have like, you can still keep an eye on them and obviously watch that they're safe, but at certain ages where they can kind of have a little bit more of that freedom and independence, where they can go and play a little further from you, but you still can check on them, but they're able to do that, and you don't feel like you're having to, because I mean, there's the teeter-totter stage where like you literally have to make sure they're not gonna like fall and hurt themselves, you know, when they're just learning to walk, or just, you know, so there's a lot of kind of attention that has to be paid to children during different stages and for different reasons. But I think the no break thing, like, I didn't mean to say there's absolutely no break, but there's a way in which there's not going to be an inherent break unless you create it. And that's what's hard, though, because a lot of things already had the structure of a break in them. School had a structure of a break. Work has a structure of a break. There's always the on and the off, the week, the weekend. Suddenly you're in a position where your role is constant. That's what the role doesn't ever take a break. But your tasks and your chores and your labors that you have that are associated with that role, you have to be the one to find a way to create certain breaks, whether that's having a certain bedtime for the kids, or ensuring there's a quiet time, or having some times where you ask your partner to take care of the kids, or going to the grandparents' house. Even if you're there still, you just get to kind of shoulder it with more people, and it's just nice to have one other person to like do a potty run or change a diaper or do this or that, you know, because there's a lot going on. You still have to cook the meal, you still need to tidy up. So I think all of that said, it can sound like really overwhelming, but I do think that if I don't know if this is how this is gonna sound, but I do think it's important as women, it's just speaking from a woman perspective, to value that ability. It's very challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding, and there can be something of a cultivating of strength in that. And it's okay that it's going to be really hard sometimes, or you feel really lonely in it. Like, you are being refined, and you offer something to your children that no one else can, and you will not be the only one who will have influence on their life or in their life. It's hopefully they have lots of people who are loving and pouring into their lives too, you know. But the mother is a source of something that only the mother really can provide if she's, as long as she is able to, and that is a gift to be able to do that. That's a gift. Yes, it's difficult, but it's also a gift. So I think, to me, I really would love the perspective to shift on mothering, because a lot of times it's thought of as just a sacrifice, or I have to give up my whole life and all this. Yeah, you might lose your life, but you may also gain it in that loss. And to me, that's like really important to understand, because you gain something that you could never gain otherwise. And it's not simply just like, it's the ability to do something that's kind of pushes you beyond your limits, you know? So that was a lot, but yeah, I don't know if there's like an easy answer to that, but I do think that I hope that women can step up to that. And I'm not saying like, you know, none of us do it perfectly. I'm not saying that, you know, you have, like, it's the only way to cultivate strength. There are lots of women who may never be called to a biological mothering role and will still have another role of mothering in a different way, you know? So there's other ways to cultivate strengths and to do that, and I don't think it's the only way to be a woman. Like, I think women can be women in their own right, even if they're not biological mothers. I just want, my only hope with saying all of this is to not denigrate or downgrade or downplay the importance of mother, because not for my own sake, like to sort of praise what I do, no, but just the fact is that there's a lot of talk sometimes about it being like, oh, like it somehow you had to like give up everything else you were gonna do, or all your potential, just to be a mom. And it's just like, just to be a mom, that's actually like one of the foundations of a society, you know, is like, how else are we going to propagate, really? You know what I'm saying? So just, it's not to say to make it like the end all and be all, but it's to certainly not lose its place as another very legitimate, beautiful role as a woman, you know? Yeah. I hope that helps.
It helps a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's enormously important, and certainly in a market capitalism context, that's something that doesn't account for it or recognize it. But prior to the age we're living in now, we had 2 millennia of Christianity, in which the role of the mother is sanctified.
Yes.
At the core,
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah.
And you have, when I was in Germany, I noticed, we think there's a trinity of like God, Spirit, and Son of God, but actually it's four, and Mary's right in there. And often she doesn't look too happy. She's sitting with the baby on her lap, and she's just kind of like, but they're both with halos, and it indicates the holiness of what they're participating in together.
Absolutely.
So honor you for doing that, and
Thank you.
inspired by what you shared today. It's been really illuminating. I hope it's illuminating for other people.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. Honored to have you in our home, Jacob, and honored to have this conversation with you. It's always a delight. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Cool.
Cool.